Hello guys, Crispy here, welcome back to another video. In this one, my friends, I'm gonna be testing a GeForce GTX 1660 Ti in God of War Ragnarok. This one is the Zotac MP edition of the card. We are running it with the latest Nvidia drivers, and why is this over? I must have misclicked that. Oh, why did I click apply? Well, I just needed to restart and we're back at it now with 0 overclocks, okay? Nothing broke, don't worry. You can see all of the GPU specs right here in Tech Power-Up's GPU Z as usual, and over on the left I'm pairing it with a Ryzen 5 3600X and 16GB of DDR4 3200MHz TL14 RAM in dual channel. Let's get into it! Shall we? And while it's compiling the shaders, let's go over the settings here. I am starting at 1080p resolution using TAA native, which actually looks pretty decent in this game. Medium settings preset, and the only thing I changed was I disabled film grain as well as motion blur. Everything else is set to the preset. Let's do this, or let's wait for the shaders actually. Alright guys, here we have it. Let's start counting our FPS, and as you can see, things are a little bit meh. I mean, it's 40 FPS, that's okay, it's definitely playable in a game like this, but sometimes there is some weirdness going on in that frame time graph. You can see the frame time just going like this. It's really weird, and it feels weird too when that happens. Maybe you should just lock your FPS to have a stable frame time, to like 40 frames per second. I think that should be enough since we're not dropping from 40, you know, but it's a little bit of a bummer to see that. This is usually a really smooth game on PC, at least from what I tested so far. Obviously, I tested with way higher end GPUs than this one, but still. Anyway, let's go to this area right here, starting to drop slightly into the 30s, as you can see, getting 40 here. So this is a little bit more intensive than the other area back there, I guess. And I think I just remember, like, if I go into the settings menu over here, and I show you the VRAM, it actually says 144%, so we are definitely going over the VRAM limits on the 1660 Ti, and that's probably what's causing that frame time to be all weird and unstable. And well, that's a little bit of an issue here. This has 6GB of VRAM. If it had 8GB, it could have been a way more stable experience, but it's not the end of the world. At least it's not stopping for a second every time, you know, and it's not stuttering too much. It's just micro stuttering slightly, which is still making the game playable overall. Although you will definitely feel the difference whenever the frame time graph isn't unstable. It actually feels really nice and smooth, but then that happens and yeah, it just kills the experience a little bit, guys. Let's go over to this area, which is usually really intensive as well, dropping down into the 30s here, 38 frames per second minimum so far, and getting out of this tunnel. Oh, it reminds me of Forza Horizon 5. When you get out of a tunnel there, it's also the most intensive thing that you can do in that game, and here, yeah, it dropped to like, what, 36 frames per second or something. So again, guys, it's playable, but it's definitely a bit unstable with that micro stuttering issue, unfortunately. And let's try some FSR 3.1, because this, when you set it to quality, it actually renders the game at 720p and it upscales it to 1080p, and so it should supposedly utilize a little bit less VRAM. Let's see though. I'm gonna start counting the FPS once again. Smooth frame time graph, so that's a good start. Now at 1080p, FSR, no, it's still micro stuttering. FSR 3.1, yeah, I can definitely see the difference, you know, especially on the water. It looks a lot more shimmery, unfortunately, but I can live with that. The rest of the image is slightly softer, but it's not to the point where it matters too much. The FSR 3.1 implementation in this game is actually pretty damn good from what I've tested. I've also tested it at higher resolutions, and at 4K, for example, it looks extremely good when you set FSR 3.1 to quality. Here at 1080p, yeah, it's a little bit worse, obviously, to be expected. But this is getting surprisingly close to DLSS. I am liking to see this new implementation of FSR, you know? Anyway, in the games that support about it, which surprisingly are mostly Sony titles. I don't know what's going on. Like, Cyberpunk even introduced FSR 3.0 recently in their game. CD Projekt Red introduced it in Cyberpunk, and it was a mess. Like, frame generation wasn't even working properly. It looked worse overall in terms of shimmering and stuff than FSR 2.1. So it was just a useless update, basically, in that game. Why didn't they implement FSR 3.1? It would have been so much better. And I actually told that to AMD to speak to CD Projekt Red about that stuff. I'm gonna stop it right there, guys. This is still an unstable experience. You can see it right there if I'm stopping here. GPU usage, interestingly, goes down as well, 80-something%. Could be because of that VRAM once again, I'm not sure. But let's try to set a frame rate limit. And by the way, I really like the fact that they give you some options here. Obviously, a little slider would be great, but sometimes you see FPS locks in games to like 30 FPS and then the next step up is 60 FPS. Over here, no. It gives you 36, 40, 48, 60. It's nice. I like it. 36 FPS to 30 FPS is actually quite a bit of a difference. It's 20% higher of a frame rate. Anyway, I'm gonna lock it to 40 because it wasn't really dropping from 40, so I think that's the way to play this. Smoothly at least. And over here in this area where we were having some frame time issues and micro stutters, it's now a stable frame time. So maybe this is the way to play with the GTX 1660 Ti. Just keep things on the medium settings preset because it looks better than low, of course. And it actually looks really good on medium, by the way. They've done a great job with the medium settings preset, as you're seeing right now, right? This looks sick like this, and it's very, very similar to high settings preset, which in itself is also very, very similar to the ultra settings preset. So yeah, just play on medium. It's definitely the best visuals to performance ratio that you're gonna get. Over here, of course, it's never going to drop from 40 frames per second, basically, okay? That's to be expected since we locked it to 40 and we're still using FSR 3.1. So you can have that smooth experience or smooth-ish experience without micro stuttering here after all. But can we have it at native resolution? That would be great, you know? Probably not because it will likely drop down into the 30s inside of the tunnel there. But yeah, as you can see, the water looks a lot better right now that FSR 3.1 is disabled. Obviously, it's not being upscaled from 720p. And yeah, going inside of here, things still get a bit micro stuttery. Oh, damn. I wonder if it's something else, like the CPU bottlenecking it or something, because we were seeing 80-something% GPU usage previously with unlocked FPS, but it also seemed like it was just capping itself at 45 sometimes. It's really weird behavior in this one, guys, but I don't have any VSync options or anything like that enabled, so can't be any of that. What if I try it with VSync on? I don't know. Let's try that out, I guess. So I'm gonna stand right here once again, and this is where it was micro stuttering a bit, like around here. I'm gonna stop it right there. It's already a little bit weird, that frame time. And let's disable our FPS lock, okay? As you can see, it is micro stuttering. It is getting 43 FPS, 97% GPU usage, so GPU is actually maxing out here. But let's try it with VSync set to 1, I guess, or 1.5. It doesn't matter, it's pretty much the same thing. So this is it. VSync is enabled now. It's even worse. And it dropped our FPS for some reason. It seems like it capped itself to 40 right now. That is really weird. Like, look at this. 90 FPS. It's capped at 40. What is it doing? What the heck is going on with this game? This is weird. What if I enable latency reduction here with Nvidia Reflex? We still get 45 and that little weird frame time graph. Did the developers do something to cap it at 45 frames per second? This is extremely weird, guys. I'm gonna restart the game, okay? Alright, so it's compiling the shaders again. It always does this, apparently, but this time it's way faster. And let's go over the settings again, guys. VSync is off once again. Reflex is also on there. Still using exactly the same settings down here. It's the same. By the way, these abrupt changes in the menu are just horrible. I don't know who designed this, but I'm just scrolling and it does that. It's really weird. Let's hit continue. It's already weird right here, by the way. Oh boy, what a little bit of a disappointment this is. Yeah, they're probably hiding from that bad frame time. Oh boy. It's the same thing, guys. It apparently sometimes will lock itself to 45. Really weird. Could it be because of the VRAM? Like it sees that the VRAM isn't enough, so to avoid stuttering or something, it's doing something in the background. I don't know. It's extremely weird behavior. Anyway, you could just lock it to 40 FPS and enjoy it that way. So at least there's that. There are options for you to make it better, or even 30 FPS if you want to make sure at native resolution that it never drops from the lock that you set, you know? Again, I'm not sure what's going on, but it's probably because of that VRAM being red over there, you know? Let's set it to low settings. Apparently VRAM is now at 81%, and it shouldn't make that anymore. Let's check it out around here. I'm still going to restart to make sure that everything applies. Yeah, GPU usage is still fluctuating a little bit. I wonder, maybe it's the 3600X being a little bit of a bottleneck here. I don't know, could be. This is the recommended requirements CPU, actually. Well, that's the 3600, this is the X version, so it's slightly faster than the recommended requirements CPU. I didn't think it would bottleneck a 1660 Ti. But here we are, guys. I guess I'm gonna install the 1660 Ti in my other PC to make sure that everything is working properly. Alright, here we have it, guys. I have installed the GTX 1660 Ti in the Ryzen 9 PC. It's a 7950 X3D CPU. Very overkill, I know, but it's just so we make sure that there are no CPU bottlenecks and that behavior wasn't because of the CPU in the previous one. I'm also using 32 gigabytes of RAM here, and the CPU has half of its cores disabled because it makes it a little bit better for gaming. Anyway, 1080p resolution using TAA native once again and the medium settings. VRAM was still going over the limits, and as you can see, it is still getting exactly the same behavior here, although the GPU usage is at 100% right now, and previously it was dropping sometimes into the 80 to 90% range, but it's getting very similar FPS, as you can see, like 40-ish, so doesn't really matter too much. It seems like the previous system was slightly CPU bound sometimes, but the micro stuttering was not caused by that CPU bottleneck. It's just the GPU itself, probably once again that VRAM. So now let's go down to the low settings preset, and I'm gonna restart the game. And yes, I am letting the compilation of the shaders finish. It's not the problem here, okay? Alrighty, here we go, getting 60 FPS plus at the moment. So previously we were CPU bound, even more so on low settings, of course, that's normal. But again, that micro stuttering is still happening. It's noticeable, especially moving the camera around like this very slowly. You can see it skipping some frames, or it looks like it's skipping some frames, but it's just micro stuttering all over the place. So these are 70s, 60s FPS, even going up to 80 FPS, but it's not that smooth. It doesn't feel like it is actually running at 80 something FPS like we're seeing at the moment. Probably again because of that VRAM. Yes, there we go. Even at 1080p native resolution, low settings, it is going above it at 123% there. So that's what's causing the micro stuttering issues. Now I am 100% sure, okay? If it had more VRAM, it would have been a better experience. Now, you might look at the VRAM allocation and VRAM usage and say, yeah, it's not really going up to 6 gigabytes, but it could have already swapped some things into that RAM, okay? That's probably what happened, and that's why it is stuttering like this. And the more you play, the worse it will become, because right now the game feels like it has a little bit of a memory leak issue. After like an hour of gameplay or so, I saw the VRAM usage going up by a lot on my 7900 XTX. So yeah, with these lower end GPUs, since they don't have enough RAM or VRAM, it will start utilizing system RAM instead, and it will slow things down and have micro stuttering issues, or more micro stuttering issues here. So yeah, that's it guys. On low settings you can get 60 FPS, and maybe, since it doesn't drop at all from 60 FPS, when locking it to 60 over here on the frame rate limit, it might actually be a buttery smooth experience, because the micro stuttering seems to only be there if you don't have the FPS locked. Also, it's very weird, but I have G-Sync enabled, but even then, I am seeing some screen tearing. So I'm also going to enable V-Sync at the moment, okay? So set to 60 Hz right there. Anyway, it's getting smooth 60 FPS right now. Low settings surprisingly look very good still, right? I was thinking, yeah, medium settings look very nice. Low must look way worse and must be terrible, right? But no, you're not losing much by playing this game on low settings. Even like the texture quality and stuff is not bad at all. The lighting, yeah, it takes a hit, of course, compared to medium settings, but look at this inside of this tunnel area or a cave area. Yeah, over there especially, the lighting still looks very good indeed. Lens flares as well, I like to see those. Yeah, guys, and this is native 1080p resolution, so thankfully there are workarounds once again to that micro stuttering issue and the VRAM going above its limits here. All you need to do is lock those FPS. As we've seen on medium settings, you must lock it to like 36 frames per second to have it stable all of the time at that frame rate. And on low settings, you can lock it to 60. We have some headroom there. It's only utilizing around 80% of the GPU here. Let's see it in this little town area once again. See how much that will tax our GPU. It seems to be pretty much the same thing. Oh no, it's going up into the mid 80% range sometimes. Yeah, 84, 86%. But as long as it doesn't go over like 95%, you're absolutely fine. This is definitely the way to play this game. If you want medium settings, I really feel like you shouldn't really play with medium settings since low looks so good already. But if you really want medium, go ahead and play with the controller, lock it to 36 FPS or 40 FPS, and it's going to be a fine experience. This area doesn't seem to be as intensive. GPU usage is going down into the 50% range, which is awesome, actually. Like, yeah, the game is pretty well optimized aside from that VRAM, you know? Now, I still haven't touched frame gen, so I guess we'll try that out. I'm gonna unlock our FPS. Maybe frame gen makes things smoother as well. So, alright, here we go. FSR FG is now enabled. VRAM usage going over the limits, of course. TAA still set to native, so this is just FG over native resolution at 1080p. And look at that. What? No way. No way. You not only get higher FPS, but FG also fixes the micro stuttering issues. That is absolutely insane, and it's even more insane in CPU-bound scenarios. Obviously, in this system, it's not CPU-bound at all, but in the Ryzen 5 3600X system, since it was dropping down GPU usage by a slight bit, frame generation helps it a lot. It would make it so the GPU would run at 100% all of the time with FG enabled. It would remove the micro stuttering, because it also removed it here. And it makes absolutely no sense because FG utilizes more VRAM, guys. It's buttery smooth. It is a high refresh rate experience, close to it. I mean, you can feel the difference between 105 FPS and 60 FPS, so it is a high refresh rate experience on a high refresh rate panel, guys. However, if you take a look at that RAM utilization, it's at 14.5 gigs right now, so it definitely has swapped some things that should be on VRAM into the RAM. But you know what? That could be why it's performing better, because the VRAM isn't filling up as much. It's only at 5 gigabytes of allocation and 4 of usage. The things that it needed to move around to RAM already have moved around to RAM. And now it's buttery smooth. And FG is also working just fine. I mean, this is incredible. Good job with FSR 3.1's frame generation. I'm not sure who is to blame here for the great implementation, if it's the developers or AMD, but damn, when this is working properly, it works properly. Holy crap, right? You know what? Lastly, I just want to see, can we get like 144 frames per second? I'm going to do quality FSR 3.1 plus FSR FG. Obviously, this starts looking a little bit worse, especially on the water, but everywhere else it still looks sharp, although a bit more shimmery. And okay, now this is getting very similar FPS to what we saw before, probably because this area is a bit more intensive as well. With the 7900 XTX, I was also seeing the least FPS in this particular area. But no, sometimes it goes up to like 130s. That's insane! With these graphics, I mean, it looks sick, doesn't it? I'm very happy with this. Thanks very much for watching. If you have a 1660 Ti, you can definitely play God of War, and that's amazing.